Good morning, everyone. I am Miss Jennifer D. Rosales, and our lesson for today is about the effects of foreign popular culture on Philippine society. The Philippines has been colonized by Americans and Spaniards and occupied by the Japanese, which brings several influences to the Filipino culture. When Spaniards came to the Philippines, it brought several cultural elements as they introduced their clothing, their eating habits, their cooking, their forms of amusement, Spanish words, and most of all, the intermarriage of Spaniards and Filipinos. Some Spanish cultural influences on Philippine society are the following. Change of Filipino names. Pre-colonial Filipinos had no surnames. They based their names on the physical characteristic of the person or the location where they were residing. However, during the coming of the Spaniards, the Filipino names were changed. The Spanish authorities were confused about having multiple records of the same person. Therefore, Governor General Narciso Claveria decreed the printing of the Catalogo Alfabetico de Apellidos, a list containing over 60,000 Spanish and local surnames that were distributed to Filipino families to avoid confusion and duplication in the conduct of census and taxation. The next is intermarriages. These intermarriages had an influence on Philippine society since the children of Filipinos and Spaniards are referred to as Spanish mestizos or mestizas. The skin tones became a mix between brown and white, resulting in a stunning melding of the two. In the clothing, Spanish influence came across this aspect, wherein they made the native Filipinos called Indios wear barongs and tact to distinguish them from the ruling class. Also, the mestiza dress was influenced by Spanish dress, as Filipino women used to wear this clothing. Simultaneously, the men were influenced in their clothing by the Spaniards, which was called the Americana. Since the Spaniards ruled the Philippines, the position of Filipino women was a demotion. There was somehow an unfair treatment of the capabilities of Filipino women. They only existed as dependents of men. It was instilled in their minds to prepare themselves for marriage, which was thought to be the only function of women. That is how Spaniards affect the position of women. Then, the pista or fiesta was introduced by the Spaniards, giving the Filipinos a day or so of relaxation from their toils on the farms. Next is, Spaniards also affects Philippine society in terms of the language as they were able to learn the Spanish language because the Spaniards used it to deal with them. Filipinos came to learn the meaning of the word and other words like it and used them in their daily life. This process resulted in the incorporation of Spanish terms into Philippine languages such as Hiligaynon, Sugbuhanon, Bicol, Tagalog, Ilocano, and others. Moreover, the Spaniards introduced Catholicism to the Filipinos, who readily accepted it. And in terms of geographical unity, when the Spaniards came, they organized a central government that ruled the entire country. Another foreign popular culture that affects Philippine society was during the American colonization. During the stay of Americans, they were able to introduce activities that affect Filipinos' way of living, primarily the democratic partnership, in which the Americans exploited the Philippines for the benefit of both countries, resulted in establishing a government called democratic government. Filipinos never forget how the Americans took them as partners in the experiment of democratic self-rule. Then, America's greatest achievement in the Philippines was its introduction of the public school system. It impacts the Philippine society by having a school system that was not based on the life beyond, but the life on earth since it emphasized honesty, cooperation, and civic consciousness, with the government's work of helping the people's welfare, mutual help, love of labor, and the advancement of learning. As a result, many Filipinos acquired English in a few years and were eligible to take civil service tests. In terms of public health and welfare, the Americans improved public health and welfare as their second greatest achievement in the Philippines and benefited all the Filipinos. With this, Filipinos became healthier and taller as they were taught about hygiene and sanitation, especially nutrition. Then, Americans impact the improvement in the trade industry, wherein Filipino products entering the United States were not taxed, and American products were likewise not taxed. The Philippine economy, particularly the mining industry, prospered under Americans, and Philippine exports to the U.S. increased. As a result, the Philippines became a more progressive society. The Americans also improved the various means of transportation by establishing bridges and culverts, and communication that allows Filipinos to easily interact and engage with other people around the world. During the American colonization, individual freedoms were recognized in the Philippine society. It widens the democratic base and propagates the democratic principles throughout the country, not only in words but also in deeds. Hence, these freedoms are the freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom to complain, and freedom to change one's domicile. Also, the Filipinos came to know about the party system practiced in the United States. Based on the political platforms since Americans introduced many American institutions during their colonization. Lastly, Filipinos were encouraged to become authors after being exposed to American culture and learning to write in English within 10 years of the American occupation. Its impact on Philippine society is still seen today, with English terms and phrases being adapted into Tagalog. Another and last foreign popular culture that affects Philippine society was during the Japanese occupation. The Japanese often encouraged the Filipinos to follow Japan and be governed by strong morals and strong political ideals. Filipinos were also taught that teaching Tagalog in schools gives people confidence in building their own culture. So, Tagalog literature began to thrive under the patronage of the Japanese military administration. With this new and favorable handling of the Tagalog language, many of our Filipino authors in English began to experiment with Tagalog. Nipongo, on the other hand, would introduce the people to Oriental culture and ideals. When the public schools reopened under the new rule, Nipongo was established as a required course in the primary and secondary curriculum. As a result, influential Filipino youths have learned to speak Nipongo like native speakers. Lastly, the arts, including music, followed the same systematic trend of change. Besides, Japanese songs were taught in schools, public meetings, and entertainment venues. So class, that is how foreign popular culture affects or influences Philippine society and continues to exist up to this day. Experienced by us and cultivated to introduce to future generations because it was the necessary component of having this type of nation in the present. And that would be all for our discussion for today. Thank you for listening.